Have Christians normalized slander and mockery by calling it parody and humor? If you're watching this video, then this issue is probably near and dear to your hearts. And I'm talking about another attempt to debunk Christian satire, Christian humor. I'm Jeffrey Swindoll. Welcome to Jeff Review. So this attempt comes from Pastor Paul Carter, who recently tweeted something that got some traction amongst Christians on social media. And he said, the widespread embrace of parody by Christians, think the Babylon Bee, has been unfortunate to say the least. We've normalized slander and mockery by calling it humor. God help. So let's review this. First, he says there's a widespread embrace of parody by Christians. And I actually agree with him. Sites like the Babylon Bee and Not the Bee, which are both run by Christians, by the way, are constantly using sarcasm, humor, hyperbole, all the different kinds of comedic rhetorical devices. And these sites wouldn't be as successful as they are unless a substantial amount of Christians embrace them. I have multiple group texts and direct messages where a lot of the time what we're doing is sharing articles from these kinds of sites with each other. You know, I guess it's kind of like how Popeyes said Popeyes would be nothing without Black lives. So I'd say the Babylon Bee and Not the Bee would be nothing without Christians. Now, why is this unfortunate? Well, Carter says it's because we've normalized mockery and slander by calling it humor. Now, as an American, I must say, I take issue with Mr. Carter's spelling of the word humor, but I digress. The real point of focus I have on this tweet comes from the charges that Carter makes. Mockery and slander. Those two things are quite a big deal in the Bible. We can go straight to the Ten Commandments and see this. Now, having done extensive research on the Ten Commandments through the Kingdom Chum's original Top 10 Hits VHS, thank you, Mom and Pop, I remember which commandment number this is. Commandment number 9. Bearing false witness is a huge deal, ladies and gentlemen. And we do, of course, mean ladies and gentlemen. And Carter says Christians have reached a point where essentially 9th commandment violations are normal and acceptable, at least in part because Christians have embraced things like parody and humor. He does give us this one proverb, which is apparently supposed to prove his point. Let's see if it does. Proverbs 10:23. Doing wrong is like a joke to a fool, but wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding. You know, I know Carter is a pastor and all, but it's got to be said, he really misses the point of this verse, and consequently, he really misapplies the verse to Christians. And that's a shame, especially considering he's a pastor who's supposed to be exemplary in rightly dividing the word of truth. So from the tweet, it seems he thinks the verse says, if you make jokes about wrongdoing, then you are a fool. Now, do the Babylon Bee and Not the Bee make jokes about wrongdoing? Yes. So did the prophets in the Bible. Did the great prophet Elijah normalize slander and mockery when he sarcastically asked the prophets of Baal if their God was asleep or taking a dump when they were calling to him? How about Isaiah making fun of the stupidity of people worshiping idols? Was Isaiah being a fool for making jokes about wrongdoing, idolatry even? No, he was righteously calling stupidity, insanity, and idolatry what it actually is: stupid, insane, and evil. And yes, one of the ways he did that was through things like sarcasm, parody, and humor. And these are just a few examples. There is so much sarcasm in the Bible, it's not even funny. No, wait, don't I mean that it actually is funny? Yeah, whatever. Let's get back to the verse. The verse says, the fool thinks doing wrong is like a joke. That is, the fool doesn't see wrongdoing as a problem. The fool thinks, who cares? What's the big deal in doing wrong? The verse is not saying a person is a fool if he or she makes a joke about wrongdoing. The foolish person finds pleasure in doing wrong as if it's like a joke, just for fun. I mean, look at the other half of the verse and you'll see it too. It says, wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding. I think it's clear that the verse's emphasis is on one's value judgment and desire of either doing wrong or doing good. The verse is not a commentary on the kinds of jokes you should make. And I know I'm not the only one that thinks this, by the way. If you look elsewhere in the book of Proverbs, it has similar verses. In Proverbs 2:14, it says, evil men rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil. Proverbs 15:21, folly is a joy to him who lacks sense, but a man of understanding walks straight ahead. The ESV Study Bible, which Adam Ford calls the Elect Standard Version, says this about Proverbs 10:23. The heart of the righteous finds pleasure in wisdom and can hope that such a path leads to being established forever. The heart of the wicked treats doing wrong as a trivial matter, yet dreads the inevitable end to which such a path leads. And Carter might hear these additional verses and notes and say, Yeah, but that's not what I was talking about in the tweet. And to that I say, I know. The verse you quoted is saying that. So why are you using it to say something that the verse isn't originally saying? Now let's ask this. Do the Babylon Bee and not the Bee think wrongdoing is fun because it's more clickbait for them? Now, they can answer that for themselves. And I actually think they have answered this question many times before. But judging from their articles, it's plain to see that they do think evil things really are evil, not just a good punchline. And if you check out the podcasts of these respective sites, Kyle and Ethan at the Babylon Bee, and Adam Ford, Joel A, and Peter Heck with Not the Bee, you can hear the ideologies and the convictions behind the Christians that are in charge of these sites. And it is evident that they are unashamedly Christian. Their moral compasses are not confused to the point of taking pleasure in evil, which is what the verse is talking about. Now, I'm sure some Christians do feel enabled by the success of satire and humor to be snarky, slanderous jerks. And that's not surprising. Sinful people will always cling to whatever useful excuse they can come up with to normalize their sins. Does that mean God's grace normalizes wanton sin? By no means, as Paul says. And I say the same thing about Christian satire and humor. Just because some misguided people want to find some excuse as a cover-up for their sin doesn't mean Christian humor itself is inherently wrong. I cannot tell you how many times I've had serious, mature discussions about God, family, church, culture, the list goes on. And guess what sparked that discussion? Articles from sites like Not the Bee and the Babylon Bee. And I've had these kinds of fruitful discussions with all kinds of people, including non-Christians. So there's great benefit in speaking plainly and exposing the ridiculousness of our reality, including wickedness and wicked people. Paul writes in Colossians 2:15, God disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in Jesus Christ. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, Paul says, For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. So God shames what needs to be shamed, and he dismantles what needs to be dismantled. And as followers of God, we do the same by, as Paul says, destroying arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God. So what I think is parody and humor are legitimate weapons in spiritual warfare. Christians can and should use these rhetorical weapons wisely and effectively to take every thought captive to obey Christ. So what do you think? Have Christians gone too far in their embrace of parody and humor to the point of normalizing mockery and slander? Have sites like the Babylon Bee and Not the Bee contributed to this alleged problem? Are parody and humor legitimate rhetorical devices with their proper usage? Think about it and talk about it with others. That's it for this Jeff Review. I have been Jeffrey Swindoll. Thank you for watching. See you next time.